My name is Alex. I'm 29 now, but this nightmare began when I was 24 and desperate for an affordable place to live. I found a 2-bedroom apartment on the top floor of a rundown building in the eastern district of the city. The rent was suspiciously low, nearly half the market rate, so I overlooked every red flag. The landlord, a quiet elderly man with tired eyes, handed me the keys without much conversation. His only remark was cryptic. "The floor above is completely empty. You won't hear any noise from up there." I glanced up instinctively. There was no 5th floor. The building ended at 4. I assumed he meant the roof or some storage space and didn't press him. I signed the lease and moved in the following weekend. The apartment felt decent enough at first glance. Tall ceilings that made the rooms seem larger than they were. Original wooden floors that groaned underfoot. And tall windows that flooded the place with warm afternoon sunlight. The only odd feature was a small square metal hatch set into the living room ceiling, roughly 60 by 60 centimeters, framed in rusty steel with a simple latch that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. I figured it was leftover attic access from some previous life of the building, perhaps when it had been a small factory or warehouse before being converted into residential units. I never bothered opening it. There was no reason to. Everything stayed peaceful for the first week. Then, on a quiet Saturday night, the footsteps started. They were soft, almost careful, someone walking slowly in socks across bare wood directly above my head. 10 steps one direction, a faint turn, 10 steps back. The rhythm was steady, patient, unmistakably human. It began around 11 p.m. and continued for 20 to 30 minutes before fading away. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was expanding pipes, wind rattling the roof, or maybe sound carrying strangely from the neighboring building. But deep down, I knew none of those explanations fit. The cadence was too deliberate, too alive. The next morning, I climbed the narrow stairwell to the top landing. There was only a heavy metal door marked "Roof Access Authorized Personnel Only," secured with a shiny new padlock. No dust on the lock. I knocked anyway, 3 firm raps. Silence answered. I pressed my ear to the cold steel. Nothing. Just the distant hum of the city far below. I told myself I was overreacting and went back downstairs. But the pacing returned every single night. Same time, same path. Sometimes it would pause directly over the couch where I sat watching television, as though whoever or whatever was up there had stopped to listen to the same show. I began recording the sounds on my phone. The microphone captured faint creaks and thuds, but when I played the files back during daylight, they sounded like vague traffic noise or wind in the eaves, nothing convincing enough to prove to anyone else. 3 weeks in, the pattern shifted. One night, the footsteps stopped after only 15 minutes. I exhaled in relief until the new sound began, a slow, deliberate scraping, like a single fingernail being dragged across unfinished wood. It traced the exact same route the pacing had followed, back and forth, curious rather than aggressive. Then it halted directly above my bed. I pulled the blanket over my head and didn't sleep. I phoned the landlord the next day. He picked up after 4 rings, voice flat and emotionless. "Problem with the apartment?" "I keep hearing footsteps above me at night, someone walking around up there." Long silence. "There is no one above you. The upstairs is empty." "I know, but you are on the top floor," he repeated, enunciating each word slowly. "There is nothing above you." He ended the call before I could respond. I tried everything after that. Heavy-duty earplugs, a white noise machine set to ocean waves, binge-watching shows until exhaustion forced my eyes closed. Nothing blocked it. The sounds evolved. The pacing grew heavier, more deliberate, even though it still sounded like socked feet on wood. Long pauses appeared, 10 seconds, 20, during which I could almost feel pressure pushing down through the ceiling, as if weight was shifting from one foot to the other right over my body. One night I clearly heard breathing, a slow, deep inhale, followed by an even slower exhale, so close it seemed to come from inside my pillow. I dragged my mattress into the living room and slept on the couch for a week. The sounds migrated with me, always positioned directly overhead, no matter where I tried to rest. Early December, desperation won. I pulled a kitchen chair beneath the ceiling hatch, climbed up, heart slamming against my ribs, and reached for the latch. It was freezing to the touch. The mechanism gave with a dry clunk. Dust and ancient insulation rained down. I coughed, wiped my eyes, and aimed my phone flashlight into the opening. There was no attic space to speak of, just a shallow crawl void, perhaps 30 centimeters high, packed with dust, tangled electrical wires, and bare structural beams. No flooring, no planks, no possible way for anything to walk or pace up there. I slammed the hatch shut, locked the latch, and shoved my heaviest bookcase underneath to hold it closed. Then I sat on the floor staring upward for hours, waiting. The footsteps didn't return that night. The following night they did. But now the sound came from inside the walls. Slow, methodical scratching, like one long nail being pulled down the backside of the drywall, inch by careful inch. It began near the front door corner at shoulder height and traveled horizontally across the living room wall. I tracked it with my eyes until it reached the opposite corner, paused, then resumed. Lower this time, waist level, same direction, same unnerving patience. I placed my palm flat against the plaster where the sound was loudest. The scratching continued directly beneath my skin. I yanked my hand away. The spot felt unnaturally cold. From then on, the disturbances followed a precise schedule. Every night at exactly 11:03 p.m., I began checking the clock obsessively. The scratching would begin, followed by a soft thump, as though something had sat down on the opposite side of the wall. Exactly 7 minutes of silence. Then a whisper. First just breath, then a sigh, then a low hum. After several nights, the whisper became my name. Alex. Spoken calmly, clearly, without anger or urgency, like someone on the other side of the wall reminding themselves of a fact. The first time it happened, I froze completely. The second night, it returned. The third. Always identical timing, identical tone. I barely slept anymore. I started crashing at my sister's apartment during the day and only returned home long enough to shower or grab clothes. Every time I crossed the threshold, I felt eyes on me, not just from above, but from every corner, every reflective surface, every dark window. One afternoon, I came back earlier than usual to collect my laptop. The apartment was deathly quiet. I stepped into the living room and stopped cold. The ceiling hatch was wide open, not unlocked, fully dropped down, hanging like an unhinged jaw. I hadn't touched it since the night I first opened it. I stared into the black rectangle, no movement, no sound, only floating dust caught in the slanting light. I fetched a broom, extended the handle, and pushed the hatch closed. It thudded shut. I wedged the bookcase back underneath as a barricade and fled. 3 days later, I forced myself to return for essential belongings. The bookcase had been moved, carefully slid aside, not knocked over. The hatch yawned open once more. Directly beneath it, centered on the floor, lay a single sheet of plain white printer paper. No creases, no smudges. In the middle, written in my own neat handwriting with my own blue ballpoint pen from the kitchen drawer, was one word: stay. My hands trembled so violently the paper slipped from my fingers and drifted face up to the floor. I ran. I never stepped foot inside that apartment again. I called the landlord from the street. No answer. I sent emails. Silence. A week later, the real estate agency emailed me. The lease was terminated early due to unforeseen structural concerns. My security deposit would be refunded in full. No inspection. No explanation. I stayed with my sister for months afterward. Even now, years later, I sometimes jolt awake at exactly 11:03 p.m. Most nights the room is silent, but every few months, always when I'm completely alone, I hear them again. Soft footsteps, not overhead, inside the room, approaching the foot of my bed, stopping. Then in that same, calm, motionless voice, Alex. I never speak back. I never will. Because I understand that if I answer even once, it won't simply repeat my name the next time. My Aunt Clara lived by herself in a modest ground-floor apartment in an aging 3-story building close to the old university quarter. She was 67, retired from teaching, never married, quiet, but warm whenever I stopped by. I made a habit of visiting every couple of weeks, bringing fresh vegetables, helping with small repairs, sitting at her kitchen table over mint tea while she recounted stories from decades in the classroom. Roughly 2 years ago, she began mentioning the woman in the hallway. At first, I assumed she meant a recent tenant. The corridor was long and dimly lit, lined with chipped green paint and buzzing fluorescent tubes that never stayed steady for long. Turnover was high. People rarely stayed more than a year. But Clara shook her head when I asked. "No, not a neighbor," she said quietly one afternoon. "She stands right under the middle light fixture. Doesn't move, just waits there whenever the bulb flickers." I asked whether she had ever spoken to the figure. "She never looks at me," Clara replied. "She looks past me like she's expecting someone else." I offered to walk the hallway with her the next time it happened. She smiled gently, touched my hand, and said it wasn't necessary. "She only appears when I'm by myself." I brushed it off as an aging mind playing tricks. Shadows, reflections, fatigue. Older people sometimes see things that aren't there. Over the following months, though, the mentions grew more frequent. Always the same details. Tall and painfully thin, long dark hair, falling forward to conceal most of her face. Dressed in something pale and loose, perhaps a nightgown or a thin coat, bare feet on the cold ceramic tiles. Always positioned precisely beneath the central corridor light. Never moving, never speaking, simply standing. Clara said sometimes she would open her apartment door to collect the mail and find the woman already there. Other times she returned from the corner shop to see her blocking the far end of the hallway, directly in front of the stairwell door. Clara would force herself to walk past, pulse racing, keys gripped like brass knuckles, and the figure never turned its head, never followed. It only stood. I began dropping by more regularly. Whenever I left her place late, I walked the corridor myself. Empty, lights steady, no one. Then one October evening, I stayed longer than planned. We had watched an old black and white film together, sipping tea. Around 10:40 p.m., Clara announced she needed to check her mailbox. Some utility bills were due. I offered to go down for her. She insisted on doing it herself. "The exercise is good for me," she said with a small smile. She slipped on her coat, picked up her keys, opened the front door, and froze. I rose from the couch and looked over her shoulder. The corridor light was pulsing, slow, rhythmic, almost like a dying heartbeat. And there she stood, tall, thin, hair like dark curtains hiding her features, pale fabric brushing the floor, bare feet, perfectly still beneath the failing bulb. Clara whispered, "Do you see her now?" I stepped into the hallway. The woman remained motionless. I advanced slowly, keys clenched in one fist, phone ready in the other. 10 meters, 8, 6. At 4 meters, the bulb detonated in a sharp crack. Sparks showered down like dying embers. The section of corridor plunged into black. When the dim red emergency light stuttered on, she had vanished. No sound of footsteps retreating, no door closing. Simply gone. Clara clutched my sleeve. "Don't chase her." We retreated inside, locked the door, slid the chain home. I slept on her couch that night. Neither of us closed our eyes. The next morning, the corridor fixture looked brand new. No scorch marks, no shattered glass. No maintenance crew had visited. After that night, Clara stopped leaving the apartment once the sun went down. She kept the curtains drawn even during daylight hours. She told me the woman now appeared more frequently, sometimes several times in a single night. Always in the identical place, always silent, always waiting. One late November evening, I arrived without calling ahead. I knocked. No response. I let myself in with the spare key. The apartment was dark, curtains shut tight, television off. Clara sat motionless at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of long cold tea. She raised her eyes to mine. They were rimmed red. "She spoke today," she said. I sat across from her. "What did she say?" She said my name 3 times, very softly, like she was practicing it. Then she added, "It's almost time." I pressed her to explain what that could mean. She only shook her head. She was exhausted, she said, more tired than she had ever been in her life. I stayed over again around 3 a.m. I woke to the unmistakable click of the front door unlocking. I bolted upright. Clara's bedroom door stood open. She was already in the hallway, barefoot in her nightgown, staring toward the entrance. The corridor light burned steady, no flicker this time. And the woman was closer than ever, perhaps 3 meters from the open doorway. She lifted her head slowly. The long hair parted. The face that looked back was Clara's. Older, much older, skin ashen and drawn tight over bone, eyes sunken deep, but unmistakably my aunt. She regarded me first, then Clara. Then she spoke, voice thin, cracked, but perfectly audible. "It's time to come home." Clara took one step forward. I seized her arm and yanked her back into the apartment. I slammed the door, turned every lock, slid the chain, dragged the sofa across to barricade it. Clara stood trembling, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's me," she kept whispering. "That's me standing out there." I dialed emergency services, told them my aunt was experiencing a severe episode, possible hallucination or breakdown. Paramedics arrived, examined her, took her vitals. Physically, she was stable. They suggested extreme stress, perhaps the onset of dementia. They left. Clara refused to leave the apartment after that night. She ate almost nothing, spoke even less. She spent her days sitting beside the living room window, curtains now pulled open, and watched the corridor through the glass. 2 weeks later, I found her still in that chair, cold, eyes open, gazing toward the front door. The coroner ruled heart failure, natural causes. I still return to that building from time to time. I stand in the corridor beneath the light fixture and wait. I have never seen the woman again, but when the bulb begins to flicker, slowly, rhythmically, I hear them. Soft footsteps, bare soles on tile, coming closer, stopping directly behind me. And my aunt's voice, gentle as ever, whispers, "It's almost time." I never turn around. I walk away quickly, because if I look, I may see myself standing there, waiting. When I was 13, my parents inherited my great-aunt's old house on the quiet edge of town. Tall trees surrounded it. The garden was overgrown. The place looked serene in photographs, but inside it always felt too still. My bedroom sat at the far end of the upstairs hallway. Small room, single window, heavy oak door with an antique brass knob that clicked twice every time it latched, as though it hesitated before deciding to close. The first several nights passed without incident. Then the knocking began. Not against my door, from inside my closet. 3 gentle taps. A pause. 3 more. Another pause. 10 or 15 minutes of silence. Then the pattern repeated. I told my parents. They opened the closet, coats, boxes, a bare bulb hanging from a cord. Nothing unusual. Old houses settle, my father said. Wood creaks, pipes shift. But the knocks continued. Every night, identical rhythm. After about a week, I grew curious enough to respond. I rapped 3 times on the closet door. Silence. Then, very slowly, the door eased open roughly 2 centimeters. No light spilled out. Only deeper darkness. One night, perhaps 2 months after we moved in, I opened the closet door while the sobbing was loudest. The crying ceased instantly. In the deepest corner, half hidden behind my winter coats, sat a boy. 7 years old at most, dark hair, very pale skin, old-fashioned pajamas, button-up shirt, shorts, no shoes. He lifted his head and looked directly at me. His eyes were solid black, no whites, no irises, just endless dark. He gave a small, sad smile. "Thank you for letting me in," he said. I slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. I ran downstairs and told my parents everything. They searched the closet again. Nothing. The crying never truly stopped after that night. It followed me. Through school, in quiet moments between classes, I would hear it faintly in my head. At friends' houses, soft through walls when everyone else was asleep. Even after I moved into my own apartment years later, it remained. Some nights now I wake suddenly. 3 gentle knocks come from inside my current bedroom closet. A pause. 3 more. Then the same small, wistful voice asks, "Can I come in?" I lie perfectly still. I never answer. Because I understand that if I ever do, the door will open, and this time, I may not have the strength to close it again. Sleep well.